Hello, everyone. We are back. The computer seems to be working okay. Did not have to switch to a Mac. Turns out all you need to do is restart your computer every 17 days and it'll work out okay. So we are talking about Gnostic informant Neil and Ammon's comments about him. Apparently, Neil went to the event. Oh, that's not right. Neil went to the January 6th event in 2021, where there was a bunch of, some would say, radical Republican conservatives and all kinds of other stuff going on there where they stormed the Capitol. So before we talk about what Ammon said about Neil, whether Neil was actually part of this group that did the stuff involved, whether Neil is a Zionist and what that means, whether there's some conspiracy for Neil to get all kinds of money from the Zionist leaders of the world, whether that's true or not, we are going to discuss that. But before we do, we have to discuss, okay, what is the background that happened here so you can understand what is being said. So on January 6, 2021, a large crowd of Donald Trump supporters, of course, Donald Trump, President of the United States, gathered in Washington, D.C. And on this day, the Congress was scheduled to certify the 2020 presidential election. And before this, Donald Trump had been telling a bunch of people that there was all kind of corruption and that Donald Trump actually won the election, but there was so much fraud, and that's why he didn't win. And so there's a big rally outside the White House, and so people are kind of, trying to go again to be like, say, hey, well, I don't know about this, guys. That's not right. You should not do that because this is fraud. We need to hold off. So as I said before, there's a rally outside. And in this, a portion of the crowd attacked the U.S. Capitol. And this was a pretty violent scenario. Not everybody involved was violent, but there was a lot of big problems happening. A portion of the crowd forced its way through police barricades. They broke windows, entered the Capitol building, disrupted the secession. No, they disrupted the session going on in Congress that was trying to certify the election results. And these people did not like that. They did not want this to happen. So people were injured, property was destroyed. So this was a pretty overall bad thing to be part of. Not necessarily, your average Joe that might have been standing to the left of this photo, just watching happen. Maybe they might have been trespassing. I don't know the full limits of where you're not allowed and allowed to be. Probably not this close, but generally, if at least from the news perspective, if you were even at this event, you were seen as a negative. That was a bad thing, morally problem. I don't have a problem with someone being at this event. Now, if they were trespassing or if they were causing harm or just hurting other people or just doing something illegal, that's obviously a problem. But I don't want to say that, hey, we should just completely say everybody is bad simply for being around this area at the time, or even protesting, because protesting is a totally legal thing to do and actually can be good in some situations. This is the kind of the background there, but there's another twist to that. And there's another twist. The twist is that some people called the people that organized this whole event Zionists. And Zionism is, there's many different understandings of it, but one understanding is that it is the idea that it's believed that the Jewish people have a right to return to and live in the land of Israel, their biblical and historical homeland. So you might be thinking this has absolutely nothing to do with the Trump election fraud. And you might be right. Is there any evidence that there was any actual Zionist connections involved? I've yet to see it. but some people would call that a conspiracy theory. Some people don't like the Zionists, though, because there are some claims that Zionists, or at least the leaders involved with Zionism, they want chaos in the United States. So that's why some claimed that they engineered this Capitol riot, and they used Trump supporters as pawns. So the Trump supporters weren't actually fans of Zionism, or at least some of them weren't. But the Zionists, the big people in charge, apparently, supposedly, they used their influence to try to get the people to rebel and do bad things at the White House on that day. And supposedly their goal was to destabilize the American democracy. And also supposedly Zionists want Trump back in office. So why Israel, who is a completely different nation, and they're doing their own things, and they got their own problems, why they would really care much at all about what's going on in the U.S. There might be some slight political leanings from the outside looking in. I'm not some expert on this, but it's a seemingly unrelated claim. You guys can talk about it in the comments if you want. So then there is another concept here going on, which is Christian Zionism. And this is, of course, by Christians that are not Jews. And then, they're not, when I mean Jews, I mean they don't practice Judaism. But they do believe that thing we talked about before, which is that they want the Jewish people to have a right back to their homeland. And sometimes this is related to the Bible, but the Christian Zionism itself is a political, religious ideology that espouses they want them to return to the Holy Land, and involves prophecies and founding of Israel in 1948. If you're familiar with the rapture stuff like that, sometimes it's connected to it. So oftentimes the Christian Zionists are often the super very conservative types. That term began to be used in the mid-20th century in the place of Christian restorationism, as proponents of the ideology rallied behind Zionists in support of a Jewish national homeland. So this is kind of odd. What does this have to do with Neil or Ammon? We are going to dive into that. So that is that. Let's talk about what actually Ammon says. Of course, this is Ammon, everybody's favorite Greek PhD person. We've talked about him on the channel, of course. So what does Ammon say about this?
So brilliantly made. Watch what happens. The assault is coming from these people. Yeah.
I'm actually playing the wrong video there, but so what is the context of this video I should talk about is that Ammon went on a band tour, and he, on this tour, one of his followers interpreted one of Ammon's teachings about ancient history, and basically used that as an excuse to assault, grape another part of Ammon's group. So Ammon responds to this, and he is like, "Hey, no, that's bad." And now this is just alleged. We don't know for sure if this is actually true or not. We don't have, it's not like there's some court hearing or something. But in this of saying, "Hey, I'm going to," in this, Ammon, in the midst of saying Ammon, in the midst of Ammon saying, "Hey, I'm going to attack this person named David that did this bad thing." He also talks about Neil and this person named Georgiani, and it seems very random and odd. There's no real connection here, but this is what Ammon says in this conversation.
You can be reminded that we live in a world where people are targeting you specifically, and they're trying to use my name to do it. And they belong to the brothel. They have been here with us the whole time. They have infiltrated us the whole time.
All right. So as I said before, we can actually even get pictures, because Ammon's group, just for some reason, they love pictures. This is one of the pictures they made of Neil, even though I'm very skeptical he's ever worn this outfit ever in his life. of laying on money with Tobias Singer, who is Jewish, and I guess that's the only connection that they have here. Maybe he did some video about Zionism, who knows? But he doesn't have any connection here. I can promise you that. And then there's the David Hooper person, and then there's a couple other. I don't even know who that guy is under the sign, but Giorgiani's on the very left. So apparently, I'm not even kidding. This isn't like some metaphor. Ammon is claiming that all of these people were in this somehow, in this together, about this random rock vent that has this one person in his group doing something very bad to another thing. That is Ammon's claim. And that in this, he's saying that Neil set it up. Neil set it up that David did this, along with all these other people. Now, where he gets it from, he never says. He never gives any evidence for it, so we're just completely lost. I can only say this is wild. And it's very baffling, but let's keep going.
They belong to a consortium that deals out Israeli tourism and propaganda.
Okay, so he says that they belong to a consortium that deals out Israeli tourism and propaganda. So I personally, I'm not up to all these political debates and problems with this. And hopefully I've shown that I know just a little bit to give the background context, but yeah, I'm just not up to date with it. So maybe that's where I'm misunderstanding the problem with Israeli tourism. But yes, so here is Neil. Definitely Neil, and definitely not AI. Here's Neil doing tourism, and I guess Ammon sees this as a very bad thing. Technically, he says they belong to a consortium that deals out. So maybe Neil actually isn't part of the tourism. I'm not sure just overall what the problem is, but he's connecting them with tourism. So yeah, he's just a little unclear whether he thinks that Neil is a tour guide or not. But either way, I found this picture that's definitely not made up. And yes, here is Neil being a tour guide. Although I did ask Neil, and you can tell me if you think he's lying, but I asked Neil, have you ever served as an Israeli tour guide? He says, LOL, no. So the jury's out unless if we can get some evidence, like video evidence of Neil's entire life. We'll never be sure whether or not he was a tour guide. But at least this is what he claims. So, it's certainly worth noting. So now that you've seen Neil as a tour guide, we can go back to what Ammon's saying. But also there's another connection of propaganda, which I kind of talked about, is that that people are claiming that these Zionist regimes, these Zionist organizations are or engineering this propaganda of like misinformation. Now, what the propaganda is, Ammon he doesn't say, but hey, we can just keep going.
They are the brothel of insurrectionists.
So they are a brothel of insurrectionists, and insurrectionists. I don't even actually have the actual def. Yeah, so an insurrectionist is basically someone that engages in violent uprising. That's something that happened on January 6th. Yeah, I do have a problem with insurrectionists, unless, I guess, I'm no moral expert, so I guess there's a theoretical situation where maybe that's okay, but at least for January 6th is a bad thing. Generally, it's a bad thing to be called an insurrectionist as well, but Ammon thinks that this group of people is an insurrectionist.
And now we are not playing a game.
We're not playing a game.
It is my sincere hope and desire that this woman who was attacked.
Yeah, so then he gets more into details about the attack. So the other thing worth talking about there is the song, at least in this video. And by the way, this video was taken down because of Ammon's language that he used in it and the descriptions that he had.
The cruise is so brilliantly made. Watch what happens. The assault is coming from these people. Yo.
Yo, this was for Ammon and his daughter. Got a swatter, butterfly with a fly swatter. I oughta feed him to the main ass for the slaughter and turn the stained soul into demon fire.
So, by the way, this is Ammon's one of his mods of his Discord, which, by the way, the Discord is a very big, essentially, place for all of the online people in Ammon's group to meet up. This is where all the stuff happens. And he makes a song about Neil, as we'll see in a second here.
Inspired forever like Huey Kirsten. Leave him thirsting and aneurysm bursting. Now he's feeling for that theriac elixir, but he's a fucking Jan Sixer. Now,
so as you can hear, so you can ignore the whole theriac elixir, not really that important, but this person is saying that Neil, and by associating anybody else that is against Ammon's group, is an insurrectionist and is, although he specifically is talking about Neil in this instance of a insurrectionist connected to January 6th. So he explicitly says it. Now what problem that is to the world, like, yeah, I mean, I certainly see a problem maybe being connected to this group, or doing the bad things that happened in that event, or maybe being connected to the extremism. There's some problems with that. Doesn't mean that I think that they're a terrible person, or I don't think that they are necessarily doing immoral things in all instances, or that I wouldn't be a friend of them or connected to them. It would change that, hey, like, you should probably be a little more cautious, whether you're around them, or, you know, if you have kids or something like that. There could be odd connections there, not necessarily, but there could be something to be cautious about. But this is in the context of Neil, who has been critiquing Ammon's group based off of two main things. One, Ammon and his group's troubled past of criminal records and seeming abuse. And he's also claimed that, you know, they're a cult. So he's trying to, Neil, at least to me, seems like he's trying to protect the people in this group and outside the group, make people aware of the problems so that there can be less harm done. Now, why Bori has a problem with that is a little odd to me. I think that we should all be willing to talk about any moral problems so that we can all be prepared and probably fix that. And then the other thing is to talk about the Greek scholarship of historical claims that Ammon makes, and Neil goes and challenges that. And Neil is seen as the enemy. But once again, none of this has anything to do with January 6th. So why, when we can listen to it again, it's just very odd phrasing. Like, why do you randomly mention this?
now he's feeling for that theriac elixir.
So the theriac elixir, it's related to in ancient times, and I think there's other reasons it might have been used, but so I guess that's what's communicating, is that Neil needs some type of cure, maybe because he's an insurrectionist or something. But then he says, but he's a Jan 6er. So once again, I have no idea why this person Bori thinks that this is important to say. Seems very random. It's like, hey, yeah, so we don't like you, and you are wrong about Greek, and also 30 years ago you did some bad political things. It's like, I mean, sure, you might have done bad political, what does that have to do with any Greek or anything else related to that? Now, of course, this was what, like 4 or 5 years ago, which is problematic, assuming that Neil's done all of this, as we'll talk about in a second. But it's just like, really, why is there a problem? It's almost like just random name calling, which is a problem in itself. It seems usually when there's just name calling, it's a sign of a weak argument. But Let's keep playing the song. So these are all part of Ammon's group, and Neil goes, and I imagine Neil is seen as attacking them. So this is a big like, hey, we got to protect our people. Yeah. So in this conversation, I just don't understand why this Bori person wouldn't have just given arguments to disprove Neil wrong. Why does he have to attack his character or talk about random January 6 events? It just makes no sense to me. I don't see any connection. But hey, maybe somebody can tell me in the comments. There were a couple other comments in this video about January 6th, but that's enough for that one. But there's more that Ammon has said, so we'll talk about that here.
Go ahead and take it down. People, you are being lied to. This is the assailant, and he is the inspiration of the alt-right traitor, Jason Giorgiani, and his vagabond traitors of the insurrection, namely Neil Sedlak, who was financed to go through a religious organization for the sake of the Zionistic goodness of the world to bring Donald Trump back into office and to hang Mike Pence.
All right, so very interesting claim here. Apparently Neil financed, so Neil is financed. So somebody's financing Neil. And Neil, you're in the comments right now. So, this would be really helpful if you could just let people know who's financing you. That would be really helpful for my research. But Neil is financed to go through a religious organization. So I'm not really understanding that. Why would Neil be financed to go through a religious organization? Why does he need to go through a religious organization at all? It just doesn't make sense, Neil. So I really appreciate if you could, I don't know, maybe make better decisions, not go through religious organizations. Just go, like, you didn't have to do that. I'm just playing, of course. But so Ammon says, Neil financed to go through a religious organization for the sake of the Zionistic goodness of the world. So I don't know what Ammon thinks is the Zionistic goodness of the world, but to bring Donald Trump back into office and hang Mike Pence. So I obviously have a problem with hanging Mike Pence. Ammon doesn't give any evidence for this. So we are left to just talk about what evidence we do have. I do have a problem with Ammon making such big claims without evidence. It seems like that could be really big problems, especially because, like, hey, even if I'm extremely confident that Neil did this really bad thing, that I would like to provide evidence to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding it, because I could be misunderstanding it. I don't want people to be misled based off of my misunderstanding. So it's better to just give the source, give the evidence, so that we can make our own decisions. But Ammon doesn't do that. Hey, that's on him. Of course, this implies someone paid Neil or supported Neil. Not sure what evidence we have of that. He's saying that he was secretly funded by a religious group for a Zionistic political mission to help reinstall Trump, participate in violent anti-Pence sentiment connected to January 6th style extremism. Okay. In some online spaces, Zionism is used as some kind of catch-all term, meaning secret religious influence, global political manipulation, hidden funding. And a small number of online conspiracy communities claim that a bunch of Jewish organizations that were Zionists were somehow involved in the 2020 election on January 6th. So I think this is where we get the connection here of January 6th and Zionism, because January 6th, on face value, doesn't really have anything to do with Zionism, but for some reason, people thought they were connected for some reason, and apparently Ammon does as well. And apparently Ammon thinks Neil had a big part to do with that. But yep. So there's more comments here. Let's keep going.
He was there for the cause. It's too bad the war caught on.
So look at all this money Neil's making. Although I don't know, Neil. I mean, if I'm looking at this, hopefully you're not getting too excited about the money in your hand, because what is that, like maybe $500, and on the desk it's a bunch of quarters of pennies. So I mean, if you actually are supported by this group, I mean, I guess $500-600 is pretty nice. I don't know, like that's a lot of effort to go through if you're not going to really make a lot of money.
Off the tourism, because everything fell apart, and it turns out the LADA is screaming at Neil. You've got to stop this guy.
Okay, LADA is screaming at Neil. You got to stop this guy. I don't know what LADA is. Someone please help me in the comments. I can't figure that out. Neil says I get $47 a month. So yeah, like I just doesn't seem like that's worth it to go through all that effort.
You've got to stop him. He's gonna blow everything.
So I'm just saying that this LADA person is saying you got to stop it. Neil's gonna blow everything.
Everything. This is a perfect opportunity. This is a perfect opportunity for obfuscation and lies.
This is a perfect opportunity for obfuscation and lies. And of course, by the way, this is all in the context of Ammon defending his group because someone in his group attacked another person in his group. In Ammon's name, saying that he was using Ammon's arguments to justify himself. So yeah, as we see on this picture, apparently there's this big like conspiracy, Zionist conspiracy, that they're all connected. Once again, zero evidence given so far.
Perfect opportunity for obfuscation and lies. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
And then Ammon said, I don't care what happened. Like Neil, he gets a picture and saying, I don't care what happened to her, the girl that was supposedly attacked. That is... And Neil never said anything like that. So I do have a big problem with that. Neil went on record saying that, hey, this is a bad thing for everybody. So this is just straight up talking bad about him, basically lying. I have a big problem with this.
That a woman was assaulted.
Okay, and apparently Neil set it all up. So he's talking about this thing that happened in the group, and apparently Neil not only set up or was a part of this January 6th thing, but also he set up this attack with this David person and his group. And do we have any pictures of Neil actually being at the event or in contact with David? No. So, I don't know. It seems very random and odd. And I almost want to say that he's trying to deflect attention from the seeming problem in his group, that there would be someone that would use his arguments as justification for doing this. And also the idea that people would feel unsafe because people might do that in the future. And Ammon's responding to that, and this is how we respond to it, by saying that Neil set it all up.
Woman was assaulted in my name, and that I was painted immediately there.
Okay.
Thereafter by a gentleman named Neil, who was January 6ing the shit in the Capitol. And guess what? This group of defenders of rapists do.
All right. So he says it was all a deep state set up to make Ammon look bad. So that's certainly an idea. But he says Neil was Jan 6ing in the Capitol. And this is all some big setup. Once again, zero evidence given. He has other pictures. You see Neil in the top right corner. I just find this one a little funny because it's like, did they crop it out, or were they like, I mean, surely the AI wasn't like, yeah, put Neil in it, but just like in the very corner. So I'm just real curious what happened here. Then, as I think we already saw this one before, give me your money. And I set it all up. This was another comment. I don't have any ability to judge whether this is true or not. We'll have to look at the evidence to see if Neil really is a part of this group. But he's saying that Ammon is calling Neil a Jan 6er is code for FED, Fed. Basically, January 6th was ZN, obvious PSYOP, ran by the FBI. So this Ryler person is saying that the January 6th event was ran by the FBI, organized from the FBI. So not the Zionist group, unless the FBI is part of the Zionist group. I don't know. It seems to me like this is a lot of speculation, a lot of conspiracy theories with no evidence. But let's keep going. Ammon is probably saying this is because of Project Pogo. Okay, that's an. We don't need to go into all that, but people can look into that if they want. Apparently, Project Pogo, where they recruit people from the prison system to become influencers. Now, Neil was part of the prison system at one point when he was quite a young lad a while back, and he is an influencer now. So maybe this is the most evidence we'll get. Let's see. Usually dealing with history occult stuff. So why the FBI would do this, I'm very skeptical about. I don't know all the details behind it, but maybe this makes any sense in Ammon's head. It seems like there's contradictory data here, but hey, who am I to judge? So this is what Neil said to me when I asked about it. On the top right, you'll see that I'm actually even a little confused myself about what is even being claimed. But Neil says, I went with some people at my church on January 6th. So Neil is admitting that he did go to this event on January 6th to Washington, D.C. to pass out flyers in King James Bibles. And so I laughed out loud when I read this. King James Bibles. Neil was walking around. Neil, who is his name is Gnostic Informant. He critiques Christianity all the time. It critiques evangelical and is not afraid to say bad things about them. Apparently, at this time, which was only like 4 or 5 years ago, he was giving out King James Bibles and quote unquote saving souls as so that that's evangelical language for like witnessing evangelism. And in parentheses, he says, as well as my church wanted to support Trump. So he's saying that his church wanted to support Trump. Neil, not himself, is not admitting to wanting to support Trump. He says, none of us went inside the Capitol. Most people didn't. We left when it got really bad. I told this story for years. Nobody dug it up. And then I went to Israel in 2022. So 2022 is about a year later. And this is really interesting that Neil will be at this event. Anyways, Neil, I'll have to talk to you about this. I'm sure you got some fun stories. Then, of course, there's the question, okay, what evidence? So it's one thing for Neil to make this claim that he was there for King James Bible saving souls, but like, what evidence is for it? And then what evidence is there for what Ammon says? Is Ammon just confusing, he went to January 6th, and therefore he was part of the whole thing? Just going to give King James Bible the saving souls isn't necessarily bad. So, there seem to be some confusions and things we need to clear up. So let's dive into this. My first thought was to be just a little skeptical of Neil here. Not that I'm saying that he would lie to me, but I'm just like, this sounds hilarious. The idea that Neil would be part of this King James only group, 4 or 5 years ago. And so he sent me this. This is hilarious. And let's see if we can get this to not blow up my computer. Reference to last night. So this is this is amazing. This makes me so happy inside. And this is hilarious. So this is Neil, and he doesn't even look like the same person. Neil looks here just like he does in. Let's see if I can find that photo. In here, like. Now this one's obviously AI, but it's a very big difference in looks here. Ironically, even though it's only 4 or 5 years ago. So we have Neil, and he's on this podcast with a bunch of super evangelical people. What does Neil say?
About these are false teachers. These are leading people astray. And you see the same thing happening today with our media, with our teachers in the public school system. And people know this, but they're scared to speak up and talk about it. So you only hear it in private conversations. That's why we have this show. We want to get the word out there, get the truth out there. That's why it's called Grace and Truth.
Yeah,
You know?
The devil's really.
That's why it's called Grace and Truth. I'm not impressed with your joke there, Neil, or pun. But hey, that was a past life. I forgive you for it. And as further evidence that Neil was super evangelical, we have him saying amen to this video. That's all he said. All he said was amen. Oh my gosh. Neil, you're a fun guy. All right. So so Neil is part of this, whatever group. You can check out this video if you want. It's a bit cringe. He talks about some of his testimony and stuff like that. I mean, at this point, so he told me in person that he wasn't he didn't accept the King James only as the only actual inspired translation at this time, but he still went to their church. He said they were still accepting of him and that he still had some maybe more Gnostic beliefs at the time, even though he went to this conservative church. Not really relevant for the video, but I found that very ironic. So he wasn't a full-blood evangelical, maybe, but he, that's Neil. That's evidence that he was giving King James Bible. So I think it makes perfect sense that he would be doing that if he's super evangelical. That's what evangelicals do. It doesn't prove that he's not a Zionist. It doesn't prove that he's not a January 6er, as in participating in the thing. But let's see what other evidence we can come up with here. So this is, and the funny thing about Neil is that he was doing podcasting for quite a while. So this is a video with 41 views. So we had to pull out the woodwork for this one. His old channel, Nickel City Chronicles. Neil, you're about to get like 100 new subscribers to this channel. But he talked about politics and stuff like that back when he was a Christian, quote unquote Christian, more evangelical. But this is November 8th, 2020. So this was about 3-4 months before January 6th, and around the time when Joe Biden was elected, and they're talking about the voter fraud. And we're going to see if what Neil says here matches up with somebody that would participate in the January 6th problems.
Doesn't want to give up power. He has every right to question the process. The process needs to be taken seriously, but he has to do it the right way. He has to go to the courts. He has to prove,
which is what he's doing.
He has to prove his case. He has to find, first of all, he has to pick which states. He can't just say recount, because you have to go individually state by state. Yeah. So I think he wants to look at Wisconsin, Arizona, Michigan.
Pennsylvania.
He's got like 5 states.
A lot of.
All right. So if you didn't hear that, Neil is describing what he thinks that actually, we didn't get to the part that I wanted to really show. Let me actually make sure this is the right video here. Yeah, okay. We can watch it again just to make sure I'm not dumb here.
Recount. He has to find first courts. He has to prove.
Which is what he's doing.
Okay. So what Neil is doing is Neil is describing what he thinks that Trump needs to do to correctly appeal this problem. Oh, interesting. So the guy on the left I grew up with since pre-K, and he's still Christian, right-wing Zionist type. So that's fun. But he hasn't talked in 5 years. So hey, there's that. Just fun background info. So in other words, it seems very unlikely for Neil to be saying this, unless if his opinion changed. It seems unlikely for Neil to be saying this during all this drama if he's just going to go 3 months later and storm the White House in protest for this problems with the election. That seems unlikely, in my opinion, for Neil to be saying, hey, Trump, you need to do this the right way, and then go 3 months later and do it the wrong way himself. Certainly possible that he might change his mind, but it seems unlikely to me. All right, so this is another video. I just love that Neil has this public. Didn't even plan to be randomly attacked for Zionism and January 6th stuff later, but this is a video. This is January 2021. This is 6 days, if my math is correct. 12 minus 6 is 6. So 6 days after January 5th, after Neil was there at this event. And what does he say? Let's see.
Why you have people that are getting super angry, and that's why people are getting violent, and that's why people are talking about and throwing words around like civil war and rebellion, and like that's what you're hearing, that kind of stuff. And like for me personally, like I love America and I love capitalism, and I'm passionate about like this stuff, but I'm not going to get violent. I'm not going to pick up a gun.
You never have to.
But I'm
So this person on the left is one of the Zionist crowd, but he's saying himself that he's not going to be violent, and then Neil going along with it.
But me, it's kind of because like I'm a Christian first and a conservative second. So like but there's a lot of people that want civil war and are like willing to fight and die for this kind of stuff. And so it's kind of crazy. So it's like, that's why I'm like, well, what can we do to not get to that point?
Yeah.
Like that's, like what can we realistically do?
What can they do to not get to the point of this violence?
Then that's like, I don't know.
Well, that's what the main point.
It's scary.
The main it could be.
Scary for
it could
especially
be for some people, not for me though.
Yeah, I'm not personally scared, but I'm saying for like a worldview,
like
it's
I
scary.
said, no matter what happens, there's always a possibility for change. No matter what,
Of course.
even if you're,
No, I know that. I mean, that's
even if you get told you got 4 months left to live,
yeah.
you got 4 months to change. That's it. Like no matter what position you're in, that's all you got. That's all you got is you now, and that's it. And you got to do what you have. You got to play with what you have. That's it.
Yep.
There's nothing else you can do.
Yep. No, absolutely.
So all this politics, and people get all mad and fired up. I do too. I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, I do too.
But at the end of the day, there's bigger things in the grand scheme of things. There's more important things to. I mean,
yeah.
I think all you can do. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about it.
I think
sometimes you have to just
Neil, this guy, he wanted to talk over you.
accept.
Exactly.
We're up against a global government that wants to take over so Brave New World is here, everyone. 1984 is here. And what do? You just accept it and move on.
That's honestly like,
you hear that? So Neil is saying, hey, even with all these bad problems, even what might seem scary, he's saying, well, yes, but you were in your little monologue. So he was interrupting you, but still cringe either way. So Neil is basically saying, hey, even in the scariness, even in the things that may or may not be a problem, he's saying that, hey, you just got to move on. You got to let things work out. Even in the worst case scenario, even with the disease of 4 months to live, you can always change. You can always do better, improve things in the situation. He's basically saying, hey, don't go. I mean, you don't need to do all this because everything's going to work itself out. You don't need to go like do illegal stuff and whatever. All right. So that is how I'm interpreting that. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is 5 days after. So we have evidence before and evidence after of reason to think that Neil probably isn't storming the White House doing illegal things. And we also have evidence that he's super conservative at this time, which means that, hey, it makes a lot of sense that he would just be there to give out Bibles. But at the same time, we have to be real with ourselves. While he does say that what Ammon said is completely made up, then he does say, I said my old church was Zionist. So, yeah, that is an interesting thing there. Zionism is pretty popular in today's super Christian conservative world. And so at the same time, there is like that's still there's still a question of, okay, what about the Zionism piece? Okay, maybe Neil wasn't actually a fan of the January 6th thing, hypothetically, in a crazy scenario. Maybe Neil was like a Zionist, and even though he says that he wasn't a Zionist, um, hypothetically he was Zionist, and he was part of this like group not for political reasons, but because of this Zionism thing. So let's talk about that. Is there any evidence that we have to give us any reason to think he may or may not be Zionist? This is a video that he also did that was a conversation with this person named Ali, and this person was in Israel or is in Israel now, or both. And in this video with Ali, this Ali person just heavily critiques Israel and what they're doing over there in the Israel-Palestine conflict. And we're not going to get into all that details there, but the important thing to know is that Neil is having this person on, and not one time does Neil ever say, "Hey, you're wrong. Israel is actually the good guys," which is what you would think they would say if Neil is a Zionist. If Neil is saying, "Hey, Israel deserves to be in this place of land," that if Neil thinks highly of Israel, it's very odd that he would be critiquing them or having someone on his channel to critique them without interrupting or disagreeing. But what does actually Neil say here? He says a few comments here and there about critiquing Israel, but I think this is one of the clearest statements of his position. And by the way, this was May 27th. So this is about 3-4 months after the whole January 6th thing. The point being is that if Neil is a part of the Zionistic group that supposedly was in charge of January 6th, it seems very unlikely that he would be criticizing Zionism shortly after. But let's see what he's saying.
Or pro-Israel. I'm pro-justice. I'm pro-truth. That's why I'm doing this podcast. That's all it is.
We gotta get the full sentence in there.
Before you can close out and say what you want to say at the end. But I'm not pro-Palestine or pro-Israel. I'm pro-justice. I'm pro-truth. That's why I'm doing this podcast.
So he explicitly said that he's not pro-Israel.
That's all it is. If it was the other way around, I'd be talking about, hey, what's going on with Palestine? Why are they persecuting the Jews? But it's just not what it is right now.
In a court of justice, you are supposed to listen to both sides of the argument, but we don't get both sides. We only get one side. And it's so obvious to just wake up and realize that what you're seeing is only one side of the argument. Well, of course, sometimes I bet you they do that.
Yep. So what they're commenting on is that the news is heavily portraying Israel as the good guys in this, and that Palestine is the bad guys in this. And Ali is saying, "Hey, no, that's wrong. You're being fed misinformation." And that Neil is saying, you saw Neil wave his head. Yes. Neil is saying, "Oh, yes, you're right. Israel is the problem." And you can go watch the video if you want to. So let's see what else we got here. So at the same time, Neil did go to Israel. So it wasn't completely without merit. Neil did go to Israel. I don't think we have a specific date for this video, but it was about a year or two after the January 6th stuff. So this would have been after the video we just watched. And here is Neil in the Facebook, what he posted, what he went there with. And I can't hear it. Why can I not hear it? Oh, here we go.
Yep. Here we are, the holy of the holies of this world. But is it really that? I mean, this is human creation. We have three major religions arguing over this place in a time period in 2022. You have this location right here. You see the Islamic symbol. You have the Dome of the Rock, where Muhammad supposedly flew on top of a Pegasus into the heavens. People still believe that. Abraham's Rock.
Yeah, and I didn't go into detail there, but yes. So in that video we just watched, the entire video was essentially showing Israel destruction and the attacks that they had on Palestine. So it's very clearly not a pro-Israel video. Very unlikely for someone who's a fan of Zionism.
underneath. Jesus crucified, not too far away. So you see people that are coming here and playing tug of war over this piece of land, and it's really holding civilization back, in my opinion. It's beautiful.
It's holding civilization back to be doing this.
Place that should be preserved. Don't get me wrong. I love the art. I love the history. I think all that should be celebrated. But I think it's time now that humans put the BS in the past and strive to be better and be more accepting of each other and not fight wars over things that are clearly not true.
All right. So one of the big questions in this discussion is like, who should be allowed to have the land? Should it be the Muslims? It should be the Israelites? Because the Israelites in the Old Testament, it says, oh, they deserve the promised land, but they're not really in the land anymore. So in this video, Neil is saying, hey, you stop doing that. It's it's a waste of a discussion. He's talking about things that are not true. And what he means by that is that Neil, I really don't know for the full meaning, but what I do know is that Neil is very against the historicity of a lot of the text of the Hebrew Bible. And a lot of this discussion is what it's based off. So if Zionism is saying, hey, Israel deserved to be in the land, but then the justification for them being in the land is what it says in the Old Testament and maybe the New Testament, then it seems very unlikely for Neil to be saying, oh, by the way, that justification is wrong. So here we have Neil responding to someone on Twitter saying 4,000 years ago, Israel did not exist, and they did not follow the Torah and worship Yahweh back then. Torah observant Israel never existed until the Maccabees. The first mention of Israel as a people is from the Merneptah, which is closer to 3,000 years ago. So this idea of so he's critiquing like common views about Israel and saying that the typical justification that people use is not good justification. Here's more on this. Abraham never existed. Israel wasn't even a word in any vocabulary. 1800 BCE. Canaan would not be occupied by Israelites for another 1,000 years. Who would almost never hold the land, get conquered by almost every empire that ever existed, and get sacked dozens of times. So that's another thing. It's like in the Old Testament, it says like, hey, Israel had this land for this long time. And it's like, no, historically, no, they did not. So it makes very little sense to say that Israel deserves the land, but also every justification for that we have is myth, which is what Neil is saying here. So that seems extremely unlikely to be said if Neil were actually a Zionist. Also, in this video, Neil is talking about like more like history, like a little bit of religious conflict, but he's not talking anything about Zionism. I think this is it would be unlikely for Neil to be having these videos if all he cared about really was Zionism, or that's what he was there for. Here's another video just. So he went to Egypt, as you can tell with the pyramids in the background, super cool view. But I mean, like nothing with this has to do with Zionism. Neil went to more than Israel. He didn't go just to Israel. And so we have during this time period of when Neil went and afterwards and before, we have very good reason to think that Neil would not be Zionist in any instance before, during, or after. And there's also a good reason to think that he went to Israel for other reasons other than related to Zionism. Additionally, he says, this is kind of like a sarcastic post. He's saying, so I guess Chang was right. Iran won the war. Trump surrendered and has agreed to pay hundreds of billions in damage that was done to Iran during the war. U.S. taxpayers will foot the bill, not Israel. So he's saying that U.S. people will be the problem. U.S. people will be paying for this, not Israel. like Israel should be paying, which is not something that a Zionist would be saying. So let's see here if there's anything else that we're missing. We talked about how Neil, there's no evidence that Neil participated in the January 6th stuff, even though he was there. And there's lots of evidence to think that he disagreed with the January 6th people, even though we have Ammon making these posts saying that Neil is somehow setting up not only the January 6th stuff, not only part of Zionism, but also randomly related to assaults during Ammon's concerts. I shouldn't have to say this, but this is ridiculous. Like, this is 100% ridiculous. Why Ammon would ever say this? Like, this is clear distraction. He's trying to distract from the problems within his group. There's no other conclusion that you can make if you're a rational person. So yes, a lot of stuff going on in the comments. I haven't been reading any of it. Sorry, guys. Let me know what you think of this video. What did I miss? Neil, I don't think you are a Zionist. There's zero evidence that I've seen. I've seen lots of reasons to reject that. There is lots of reason to think that you also didn't participate in the January 6th stuff, other than giving out Bibles. Just because Neil's group is Zionist doesn't mean that they also participated in the January 6th bad stuff. It also doesn't mean that they did anything wrong, or that they are somehow being funded, or that Neil is being funded. This sounds like a bunch of crazy conspiracy theories, multiple ones combined, based off of total misinformation, even though we have all these videos that Neil's been talking about for a long time. There's a lot of other ones out there of Neil critiquing Israel, which is extremely unlikely if he were a Zionist. This is extremely unlikely if he participated in the January 6th stuff. But anyways, thank you guys. This is a crazy video. I hate to say it. I don't know if Ammon is lying, or if he's like doesn't care and he's just randomly saying whatever comes to his mind. I know some people are impulsive like that. If is he just distracted and willingly lying? I don't know. I've seen several things where it maybe looks like Ammon is lying about stuff, but I know that lying is very difficult. It's hard to know when people lie because it's really hard to understand people's psychology. And what you might think about this lying is someone actually might almost like willingly deceiving themselves. So they might actually believe like some crazy things. Like when you talk about people in cults or people that believe in certain types of religion or like flat earth stuff, or conspiracy theories, like people can ancient alien stuff. People willingly believe some of this stuff, and you might think there's zero evidence and it's completely dumb, and you might even think that they're lying because it seems so wild, but maybe they're not actually lying. I don't know what Ammon's doing. I want to say he's lying, but I can't say that with certainty. Maybe Neil told him something about Israel, and maybe he's misremembering. Maybe Ammon actually thinks Neil is being funded. What I will say, I can promise you that Neil is not. I can promise you Neil is not being funded to tell this person David to come to his group and assault people. I can tell you that for sure. And I can tell you for sure that Ammon doesn't think that. That sounds just insane if you actually think that Neil would be doing that. So if anything, I think that we can confidently say that Ammon is lying about that. And if you are part of this group, that's cool if you don't accept everything Ammon says. But I think that there needs to be some transparency that, hey, if you're part of this group, that you're part of Ammon's group, you just be like, hey, I don't think that's fair that you're doing that with Neil. You show the evidence if you have it. If you don't be saying misinformation, spreading misinformation, and certainly don't be calling Neil a rapist or saying that he is funded by Zionism to somehow have people in Ammon's group assault people, which is just wild craziness. And I do think that needs to be called out. I think that if you are part of this group, you need to comment on Ammon's video and say, hey, that's not cool. He obviously didn't do that. If you are watching this, I think this also should severely change either your perception of Ammon, because either he's lying and he is willingly giving people misinformation to distract from what actually happened, or he is believing crazy info, which means that you should be super questionable of his logic and thought process. So maybe he says some right things sometimes, but in this instance, I think this tells us that, hey, he's not perfect all the time. And that's something that we should all be willing to accept. You should be willing to accept from me. Which is why I say, hey, you should be critiquing me. Tell me where I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments. I want to be proved wrong. I want to learn. I don't want to be like Ammon and never admit defeat or mistakes. Anyways, thank you guys. I want to give you the best info. Hopefully I did that today. Hope you guys have a good one.